Joining us now, Ed Yeranian. He's live from Cairo. Ed, good to have you with us, man.
Thank you, John. I am concerned that the line, we've been having a lot of lines cut on us recently, but I will try to stay with you.
Well, you know what? They're always monitoring what you're doing, right? We both know that. Let's get to the Syrian strike the president did on Friday night. What's the reaction been from the Egyptian government and generally in some of the other Middle East countries?
Well, the retired Egyptian military people have been telling me, I've heard others on the air, that they don't think Assad was behind the nerve agent that was allegedly used in the Syrian suburb of Douma, that is last week, the cause of the U.S., British, French airstrikes over Syria. They think perhaps, this is what someone told me, and these are retired Egyptian military people. And keep in mind, of course, that the Egyptian military is fairly supportive of Assad. The government has been straddling the fence because its allies, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and the other Gulf states have been supporting the opposition, the rebels, whatever you want to call them. But the Egyptian government pretty much kept a low profile on this. The Saudis and the Qataris were pleased. Public opinion in Egypt was fairly negative. Most people I spoke with thought it should not have happened. A lot of people thought it was illegal since the UN did not vote in favor. In Lebanon, public opinion is divided, probably because you have a lot of Shiites that support President Assad and a lot of Sunnis who don't. So that makes a lot of sense. I've lived in Beirut for 20 years. I know how that works. And basically, what we're hearing is that they really don't know where that alleged nerve agent shell came from. So impossible to tell who did it. And as I said on the air before, on your airwaves, there are 10 intelligence agencies operating inside Syria. And every one of them probably is up to some sort of mischief. So it's really impossible to tell who did this. And if an intelligence agency doesn't want you to know who did it, they'll always come up with some little piece of pseudo information that'll confuse the situation. So all I can say really with any certainty is something happened. It appeared to be something chemical, and it's not clear who did it.
So let me ask you this. Do you think the President, Theresa May, and President Macron of France, the gang of three here, you think they did the right thing in the retaliation of taking out what we have been told are chemical agent military development operations? Did they did the right thing, or should they have waited, in your judgment?
Well, I don't know whose missile, probably, I can't even say that, but they took out a research center in Barzeh, outside on a hill in Damascus, where they work on various military things, including gas, I believe. At least that's what's been alleged. The Israelis have hit it before. And according to Syrian TV, the video that they themselves showed, the place was pretty badly damaged. Do I think that's where Assad was actually doing chemical weapons research? No. I'm sure if they are doing it, they're doing it somewhere else, and probably in a place that's not easily accessible and that our missiles probably couldn't hit, but I don't even know that for certain. But if they did take out whatever research they were working on, I can't say it was a bad thing, but it was illegal. So ultimately, was it worth hitting that facility, which we're not even sure was working on gas at the time it was hit, to break international law? I'm not a big international law fan for many reasons, but we broke international law. Now, if you want to complain that Assad is breaking international law and then you break international law to prove it, that doesn't sound like a very, very good way of doing it.
All right, so what we said a week ago before the strike, or what I said, is I said if the strike is against identified potential or perceived or maybe chemical weapons types of operations and not the palace, all right? Because we went through the palace strike with Reagan, with Gaddafi in Libya. We see the impact that has. I said that's going to tell me that President Trump doesn't believe that there's 100% proof that Assad did this. Maybe it's 98, but it's not 100. Because if he really wanted to take out Assad, he'd have just missiled his palace, and that would be the end of the guy. All right? But they didn't do that. I mean, this, Edward, you got to admit, this was a very measured response designed not to further engage Moscow, not to further draw us into something, and certainly not to overthrow a leader and depose him through blowing him up, right? Which Reagan did when he shot missiles into Gaddafi's home, killed his son and his daughter and his wife, wounded him, right? So it was a measured response. And here's the thing. Here's why I'm not as skeptical today as I was a week ago before I went to Nevada. Because I had dinner with a couple people last night, pretty high-ranking people, confidential. And they basically told me, they were like, look, somebody's got these chemical weapons, all right? And it's going to get in the hands of the Iranians, and they're nuts. And he's like, they're going to start dropping them in drones over God knows where. And he said, you're dealing with a regime that Obama empowered. He gave $1.5 billion to, that are exporting terrorism all over the Middle East. And he said, they're basically nuts. So he said, you have to do something. And he said, we're paying the price for Obama's Iranian deal. How do you respond to that?
Yes, I agree with you 100%. I was just merely pointing out that according to the niceties of international law, we broke it. But I agree with your assessment and the assessment of the people you spoke with. But I'm also a bit suspicious of which intelligence.
Edward? Well, they cut his line again. Unbelievable. They just cut his line. It's the Egyptian authorities there. They don't like what he's saying. They just cut his line. This is the level of the lack of freedom of speech that we have in some of these Middle Eastern countries. Much different than Qatar, by the way, where I was on the air there 5 hours a day and could say whatever I wanted. Edward, you there?
Yeah, John.
All right, they cut you again. I'm down to a minute. Just wrap this thing for me here, as I was saying just before you were cut off. Go ahead.
Yes, as I said earlier, we have 10 intelligence agencies operating in Syria, and we don't know which one is doing what. This rebel area was permeated with tunnels. The BBC Arabic service industrial strength sort of Lincoln tunnels that are going under these Damascus suburbs. Anyone could have gotten in there. They had to have been built by some intelligence agency. And the Russians are accusing the British, and I think they're the people who listen to the phone lines, by the way, just in case you're wondering who's cutting us off. That is a very good suspicion. Even if President Trump did the right thing to hit this research facility, it's not clear who used whatever nerve agent they found in that suburb. And the mere fact the British were claiming this, that the urine samples showed it was nerve agent. Well, which intelligence agency got those urine samples out of there in the first place? So that tells you somebody's in there. And this White Helmets group, which is the one who took video of all of this, is run by the British Ministry of Defense and USAID. They're the ones who are funding it. So it's not a neutral organization. So I think what I want to say is, in summary, that the intelligence agencies are totally out of control. They're making a mess of Syria, and somebody has to cut a deal and say, hey, we have these interests, you have those interests, and let's stop fighting each other.
All right, Edward, Yeranian live, Cairo. Thanks for being with us. John Fredericks Radio Network, Truck the Truth. Keep it right here.